Hello, everyone. My name is Marco Wan. I am a professor of law here at HKU. Welcome to the webinar this afternoon. Racism, sexism, and other forms of discriminatory behavior are things all educational institutions say they care about and will combat. But what does that mean exactly? Is there a gap between what is said and what is done? And what is the role of the individual in all of this? Here to explore some of these questions with us is Professor Mindy Chen-Wishart, who is the Dean of Law at the University of Oxford and also a great friend of the HKU law faculty. I will now hand over to my colleague Kelly Loper to introduce Professor Chen-Wishart more formally.
Thank you very much, Marco. I'm very honored to have the chance to introduce Professor Mindy Chen-Wishart. As Marco mentioned, she's the Dean of the Faculty of Law at Oxford University and holds a fractional professorship at the National University of Singapore. And I'm very pleased to add that she has also been the Chung Yu Tong visiting professor with us here in the Faculty of Law at Hong Kong U. And she's visited and taught at law schools in, I believe, at least 3 continents, probably more than that. She's author of the very authoritative text, Contract Law, and of numerous articles on the theory, doctrine, and comparative law of contract, including in the Asian region. And there's much more I could say about her outstanding record as a scholar, a teacher, and a leader at Oxford and elsewhere. But I don't want to use up too much of the precious time we have today to hear from her. And also to ensure we have time for questions at the end. And I'll just mention, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, I'm pleased to hand the floor over to Professor Chen-Wishart.
Thank you very much, Marco and Kelly. I'm really pleased to be speaking at HKU virtually, where certainly pre-pandemic I have visited almost every year since 2005. And I'm really grateful for the audience for tuning in to listen to what some will regard as a rather controversial topic. It's also quite a personal subject for me. My journey with it started with a coincidence of events within a few days last July, or July last year, and they prompted me to try a few tweets. First, I was interviewed by the Pro-Vice Chancellor at Oxford about my experience as a racialized minority in the university, and it was part of the Race Equality Task Force consultation. And this started me reflecting about my 30 years at Oxford. A few days later, I was walking with my 3 adult sons in another city, and we were subjected to pretty loud, racist and sustained abuse by a man who followed us. He had something in his hand, which was quite menacing. No one intervened, and we were all, you know, had huge doses of adrenaline. And next day, I walked into my office, and the reception asked me, the facilities management, our reception said, "Who do you have an appointment with?" And I said, "Well, I'm the dean." And he said, "Oh, all right, I forgot." And then he follows me, I assume, to corroborate that I have the right key to my office. And of course, I pretend not to notice. So I tried a few tweets about these and other incidents. And the aim has never been to call out specific individuals, but to highlight systemic racism and unconscious bias by simply recounting some of the things that have happened to me 280 characters at a time under the hashtag #RaceMeToo. For example, when I first got the job at Merton, I brought my young children to show them around the garden. I was so excited, and an undergraduate tried to throw me out of the Fellows Garden. And then I took them to the dining hall, which was very Harry Potterish, and I explained that I would be the new law fellow, but another academic threw me out of there. It was like I said nothing. In the first tutorial some years ago, when I critiqued the views of a white man, a student said, "Oh, I don't mean to be rude, but why are you teaching us?" One time when I forgot my library card and asked to look at a reserve book saying that I was a member of the faculty, the librarian said, well, you don't look like faculty. I was walking with my PhD student, who is Indian, out after our supervision, and we stopped in the front quad to finish our discussion. And a white tourist is taking photos, and she says to us, can you please move out of my picture? I want to get an authentic shot of Oxford. I brought an academic visitor to my class. He's a judge of the Constitutional Court of his country, and he's the former dean of his law school. And the porter looked at the two of us and said, oh, the college is closed to tourists. As an insecure first female tenure-track tutorial fellow attending my first governing body dinner at my college, the colleague next to me said, oh, it must be really hard having young children. And I took that to be a friendly remark until he said, because you can't be a proper academic. And when I answered that, he said, well, you can't be a proper mother. And when I coughed and spluttered and I answered that, he added that he himself would never move countries because immigrants never belong. I felt really beaten down. I just wanted to leave. Well, the impact of my tweets surprised me. When the hashtag was less than 2 days old, a newspaper asked me for an interview, followed by other newspapers and an interview by Channel News Asia. The hashtag prompted racialized minorities to express their relief and that their upsetting, their humiliating experiences were being aired. A few people shared their own experiences, but most wrote to me privately saying that they had similar experiences, but they were too frightened to share their stories publicly. For example, someone was told by a white rival for an academic job, well, I guess they're filling their diversity quota. A postdoc's black husband felt so humiliated by the way he was challenged going into her college that he thereafter refused to go in, and so they didn't participate in college activities. Likewise, the Korean wife of an academic who was faced with disbelief by the porters who questioned her closely when she tried to go in to meet her husband. And she never wanted to go into college after that, and they left after 2 years. A black student told me he was constantly challenged going into his own college, even though he's the student welfare advisor there. And he told me that when he was walking behind women at night, he's aware of their anxiety as they look back and see a big white man. And he said, do I walk faster to pass her? Oh, she might think I'm chasing her. Should I walk slower to give her some space? Oh, she might think I'm stalking her. And I thought to myself, it's really interesting that racialized minorities are constantly having to edit themselves for the comfort of the majority. Kai Muller, who's a professor of creative writing at Royal Holloway, in his book, Things I Have Withheld, wrote, I am now a fully fledged professor. And so I was in my office so very early on my first day. It took me by surprise when the door began to jiggle, though it seemed to take the cleaning lady by much greater surprise to see me. She screamed and she ran away. I shrugged and I thought in time we would laugh at this. But soon the campus security arrived, burly men talking briskly into the walkie-talkies, and I had to present IDs and photographs to present that I had a right to be there. I was no longer a professor and the woman a cleaning lady. I was just a black man and she was a white woman, and my presence terrified her. So my first recommendation is that we need to enhance training of support services, especially front-facing staff, so that racialized minorities are not constantly made to feel like they don't belong, that they are objects of suspicion. They must not only be aware of the problems, but also manage their biases, change their behavior, and track their progress. Now, when I mention this, I'm always told, but they're just doing their jobs. And I ask, but why are they always so good at it? And so especially assiduous where racialized people are concerned. When you're on the receiving end of it, and it happens with sufficient regularity, it is exhausting. You're constantly reminded that other people think you really don't belong there. When racialized minorities are treated as imposters, it's no wonder that so many of us have bad imposter syndrome. Human beings have a fundamental desire to belong. It's third on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs after food, water, physical safety. It drives much of human behavior, including love, friendship, power, and achievement. Belonging makes us feel part of something bigger, more important than ourselves, a sense that we have roots and purpose and that we matter, which is core to human happiness. Without belonging, people can feel worthless, shameful, lonely, resentful, all negative drivers of poor mental health. Now, of course, no one ever thinks that they are being racist, you know, and Kai Muller again, I did not intend to be racist, they say to me all the time. If there is no intention, how can it be racist? They think the logic is so devastatingly simple and clear that it cannot be answered. But it is only that I have grown weary, as if one could say, it was an accident. I did not intend to push you to the ground. So the pain that you claim to be feeling shooting up your back cannot be real. It cannot be real because I did not intend it. Now, I also received tweets and messages from those in the majority group expressing shock and outrage. Now, what I was surprised that they were surprised, because I know that every racialized minority has hundreds, if not thousands, of these stories. So the hashtag has an educational function. And so my second conclusion is that institutions and individuals need to listen. Educational institutions love to display people of color in their websites and glossy brochures to show that the institution is diverse. And they loudly declare themselves to be anti-racist. But I think these sorts of color washing and self-declarations are cheap. They're kind of insulting when they're not listening to racialized minorities. It reminds me of Greta Thunberg's description of the endless declarations of good intentions about climate change. It's all just so much blah, blah, blah. Now, those opposed to change often say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think whether something is broke or not depends on who you ask. You'll get a different answer from the slave owner and the slave, because the axe forgets what the tree remembers. So invite people to share their experiences as students, as academics, as researchers, and as staff, but do so anonymously. And it's really important that the listening isn't just the safety valve. It mustn't just go off into the ether, you know, get lost like Indiana Jones' warehouse at the end of the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. The feedback needs to be read, disseminated, responded to. But I have found that in general, racialized minorities have learnt to be silent. And this includes quite senior people. It included me before July last year. Why is that? Well, one reason is that raising these issues are met with silencing strategies. So you get insult added to injury. My colleague, Taryn Kaitan, started a list of these, and I've added to them. For example, I have 10 of them. First, we let you in, we gave you a job, you should be grateful. If you don't like it, go back to where you came from. Now, a student of mine who always thought I'd failed to appreciate his genius announced to everybody at our leavers dinner that Mindy should go back where she came from. When I returned to New Zealand to visit my parents and sisters after a long time away, I was told by white New Zealanders to go back where I came from, which left me momentarily confused because I had gone back. So I was a bit incensed. So I told her to go back where her ancestors came from, and that left her somewhat confused. The second response is to say, well, you're successful and that shows there's no discrimination, shows shut up. The third response is to say that the thing that happened to you that you're talking about also happened to them once. The implication is, I'm white, so it can't be racism. Fourth is to say or imply that you're being hypersensitive, you're angry, you're prickly, you can't take a joke. The fifth response is to provide a non-racial explanation for the behavior, to say it's about anything but race. The sixth is to individualize the experience and deny the structure or frequent nature of it. It's not about, it's not about racism, it's about you, right? Or seventhly, say my Black, Asian, mixed race friend, partner, family, colleague, neighbor, they don't think this is racist. Eighth is to accuse you of being sexist, homophobic, transphobic, intolerant, bigot, bully, harasser. Ninth is to highlight any mistakes that you've made, however minor and irrelevant, and make that the issue to distract and change the conversation. And 10thly is to say, hey, we're the good guys. You're being OTT, you're being extremist, you'll alienate us. Martin Luther King expressed his frustration at liberal reaction to his activism. They're effectively saying, hey, we support you. If you want us to help, don't make us feel bad. Martin Luther King was welcomed by leaders who saw themselves as liberal and anti-racist, but they reacted furiously when attention turned to the need for local change. He wrote, as long as the struggle was down in Alabama and Mississippi, they could look afar and say how terrible those people are. But when they discovered that brotherhood extended to next door, then the latent hostilities came out. Now, I was a bit shocked to find this really very close to home. A very good liberal friend of mine said once offhandedly, oh, she was listening to this Black woman, and this Black woman was so extreme in talking about race that it made her want to join the KKK. And I said, nothing should make you want to join the KKK. But she doubled down and she went, no, you weren't there, you didn't hear. And I said, oh, I've learned about this on Twitter. It's called white fragility. And she gets very annoyed and upset with me. And I said, I think that's called white woman's tears. Well, she gets furious. And I said, it's really interesting how angry you are about all of this. Well, it did not help. In the US, state legislatures have published laws to prevent material being taught in schools that would instill discomfort, guilt, or anguish in any student because of race. The graphic novel Mouse about the Holocaust was recently banned in Tennessee because of violence and nudity. And we're talking about mice violence and nudity. The idea that you can engage with racism and not be discomforted assumes that racism is out there. It's what terrible people, the bad apples, do. On TV in the past, not what we liberal, enlightened, educated people do. It ignores the many forms of unconscious bias, microaggressions, and so on that daily chip away at racialized minorities. It overlooks the polite racism of liberal allies, of the language and the policies used to excuse and perpetuate racial injustice. It ignores the unconscious in unconscious bias. Of course, racism doesn't just mean white supremacy. Race and racism work and behave differently in different spaces. Hong Kong, it works differently, with the Han majority Chinese. Racialized minorities are not the same everywhere. And some countries have races that don't function at all in other countries. So we need to understand how racial groups are constructed and how they function in a particular place. Only then can we begin to think about the ways which power and prestige are distributed unevenly based on local ideas about race and color and phenotypical features. So please listen to racialized minorities with humility, without rationalizing, excusing, avoiding, defending, blaming, or punishing. And the proper response should be outrage that we live in a racist society that doesn't live by its rhetoric of equality in the pursuit of human flourishing, and a sense of obligation to realize that aspiration. The second reason for the silence of racialized minorities lies in stereotype threat. The idea is that people are likely to perform poorly when they feel threatened or undermined. For example, people who are aware of a negative stereotype about the intelligence or ability of the group to which they belong, they will feel threatened and they will worry that if they perform poorly, this will conform to the stereotype. And this in turn can undermine their performance. The main literature on this is on African-American students in the USA, women, on the elderly, and on students of lower socioeconomic status. A person doesn't have to believe in the stereotype to be adversely affected by it. It produces physiological responses, and I found this fascinating. It lowers your performance expectancy, it reduces your self-esteem, your self-concept, and it increases stress. It induces negative thinking. I'm not good enough. I need to do more work. It triggers alienation and dejection. And these, in turn, trigger self-protective defenses to suppress these feelings of inadequacy. But doing so consumes cognitive resources. It interferes with your working memory. It creates cognitive interference and it impairs your performance, like you're trying to multitask. Before I came to Oxford, I met an Oxford professor who was clearly very skeptical about me. It didn't help that I was 8.5 months pregnant at the time. He put me through what Oxford would call robust interrogation. I wasn't used to that at all. And I felt increasingly inadequate. In the end, you know, I'm a contract lawyer. In the end, he said, "So Mindy, why are contracts binding?" And I just hung my head and said, "I don't know. I just have no idea," you know? And when I got my postdoc research fellowship in Oxford, many of my New Zealand colleagues were genuinely mystified. And I kept being asked, why did they pick you? And my imposter syndrome kept being reinforced. And in the end, I just came up with a 4-word answer. I just said, because I was hot. Now, I told a white male colleague that I always feel that I have to prepare really well for a conference talk because I always start with a credibility gap. I have to prove why I'm even speaking, you know? And he said, "Oh, that's really interesting because it never occurs to me that I won't be good enough." And I thought, what is it like to be you? Experiments can induce stereotype threats by reminding test subjects of the negative stereotypes about their social identity. So for example, a group of mixed high and low caste boys in India were asked to solve mazes. When they didn't know which caste each other belonged to, there were no differences in their results. Where caste identity was revealed, the high caste boys outperformed the lower caste boys by 23%. The same experiment was repeated in China with migrant low status and urban boys and girls with the same results. Note that the only difference is that some students know that other people know what group membership you belong to. Now, with racialized minorities, you know, you can't avoid that because we are visibly different. I am visibly different. If I forget, I am constantly reminded. For example, you know, every year I do undergraduate admissions interviews for 17-year-olds trying to get into Oxford. Now, one year, you know, a candidate just in the middle of the interview looked at me with puzzle and said, "Your mum and dad must be very proud of you." And I think about my white middle-aged colleagues and I think, do you get that? So stereotype threat responds to the content of unconscious bias, our instinctive automatic responses to others based on deeply ingrained beliefs and family values and culture. They're absorbed by children before school age. And I was reminded of this recently about something that happened when my first son was 5. he said to me, well, you know, I mean, it was one of those usual things, you know, go to the toilet before you go out. And he said, I don't need to go to the toilet. And I said, no, you do need to go. And he said, oh, I didn't know. I didn't need to go. And he said, I said, well, see, mums know about these things like this. And he said, but mums don't know as much as dads, do they? And I said, why is that? And he said, well, because daddies go to work and mummies stay at home. And I said, well, where do you take mummy every day? Oh, to work, he said. And at that stage, my husband was being house husband. He took a year off to look after the children. And I said, and what does daddy do? Oh, he stays at home with us. So you can see that these unconscious biases can overwhelm, can trump lived experience. And I remember watching Ninja Turtles with him. And I said, oh, no, James, you know, poor April, you know, she's been kidnapped. And he said, oh, don't worry, Mum, a man will come and save her. And, you know, damn it, but a man came and saved her. So what's interesting is that even women and racialized minorities exhibit bias against women and racialized minorities. The best example I found is Nelson Mandela in his memoir, Long Walk to Freedom. He tells of boarding and the Ethiopian airway flight in his early years. And he said that when he saw a pilot was black, he had to suppress his panic because he thought, how could a black man fly an airplane? And I thought, well, if it's good enough for Nelson Mandela, you know, and then it occurred to me that perhaps if I met a Taiwanese woman educated in New Zealand who purports to be a professor or even dean of the law faculty, I would be dubious. So the third recommendation I have is that we all need allies. We be allies or we need allies to drive systemic improvements to workplace policies, to fight injustice and to promote equity through validating racialized minorities, you know, effectively saying, I see you, I hear you, I respect you, I acknowledge your pain. They can do it through supportive personal relationship. I was greatly moved by some emails that I received after when I tweeted out. Some have said, I'm listening, I'm reflecting, I'm learning, and I'm wanting to be part of the change. Someone else said, I hope to honor your generosity and sharing of your experience by working harder to never marginalize my colleagues and to always intervene if I see, hear, or read racism in professional contexts. Academics and other UK faculties and beyond emailed me to say that they would open or further their discussions on racism by reference to the hashtag. In Germany, someone said, the conversation has just started and we need this debate. Allies take responsibility for the imperfect world that they inherited, in the same way that we must all take responsibility for the environment and climate change. Allies pay attention to how women and racialized and other minorities, like those disabled people, what is their experience at meetings and other gatherings? And they stay alert to the inequities and disparities. Were they ignored? Were they talked over? Did someone take credit for their points? A student told me, often my professors, who are mostly white males, will encourage banter with other male students, but maintain their distance with me and other female and minority students. This makes me feel stupid in class, and I won't answer questions unless I'm sure that I'm right for fear of being humiliated. Allies engage in public acts of support. They respect, they draw attention to, they support what the racialized minority has said. They don't just rush up to you afterwards and say, oh, go you know, privately. They do their homework. They read, they listen, they watch, they deepen their understandings. I've been told numerous times, you know, every time these things happen, you must call it out, but it's not my job to educate you. I don't have that much time. I don't have that much emotional energy. And I've been asked all the time, what do you want us to do? Well, I think to myself, it's not my job to formulate these policies for you. You have people paid to come up with these plans. Allies consider how their own behavior might have perpetuated discrimination. They own their privilege. They recognize the extra obstacles that racialized minorities contend with, that they don't have to contend with. This can be painful because it undermines the myth of meritocracy, but it shouldn't have to happen to you for it to matter to you. Silence and complacency in situations of injustice makes you complicit, whether you like it or not. The third reason for silence of racialized minorities is because if you complain, if you raise the issue, the backlash can be really severe. And this is supported by lots and lots of research about people complaining about harassment at work and at universities. Accusing someone of racism is tantamount to accusing them of being a pedophile. You know, it's regarded as sheer impertinence. Nuclear war breaks out. The accused will fight to the death. Institutions worry about its reputation, so they often prefer to sweep it under the carpet. The complainant is cast as the problem, the troublemaker, and they're often frozen out. They can suffer huge emotional, personal costs with associated damage to reputation, future prospects, and social connections. So we need to find a way for people to say things, to complain, to mention things without triggering nuclear war. We need to signal right from the top, from the leadership, the importance of diversity and inclusion, and to continue doing so. It gives other people in the institution a mandate to pursue certain policies and to do things one way rather than another. All of this is necessary, but not sufficient. You've got to allocate some resources to it, right? How much does your university currently allocate to equality? We all like to think we're places of international learning. We all like to say we're global universities. And actually, our student population is fantastically international. So race should be right up there with gender, sexuality, and so on. And there should be proper resources for it. I can also say a few things about discrimination and hiring. In UK universities, nearly 85% of professors identify as white, 15% as Asian or other ethnic backgrounds, and only 0.7% are Black. The Bar Standards Board reports that barristers from ethnic minorities earn 68% of the income of white barristers. Women from ethnic minorities only average 41% of white male barristers, right? Disparity cannot be explained solely by practicing areas or experience. The Bar Council found that Black and Asian women are 4 times more likely to experience bullying and harassment at work than white men, right? And barristers from ethnic minority backgrounds are more likely to be referred to the regulator for disciplinary action. QCs are 80% white men, 18% white women, 2% ethnic minorities, and that comprises of 5 Black females, 17 Black males, and 17 Asian females. Black barristers say that people assume you're just a cleaner wearing a suit, or you are the criminal accused. You have to get over the initial hurdle before you can even start the job you have been instructed to do. That is, they think you're an imposter. Judges are just 7% BAME compared with the population, which is 13%. Now, when we're selecting for excellence, we tend to reproduce after our own kind. We can't help it. It's instinctive. It's part of our evolutionary biology to be tribal, to separate them from us as a prophylactic against danger. We lean against people who look, dress, speak, have backgrounds, mannerisms, sense of humor like us. And we lean away from those who are different. This serves us really badly in the modern, interconnected, multicultural world. Unconscious bias can also come out in references. Research shows a systematic difference in the language used in letters of recommendation for medical faculty positions. 85% of referees are male, 90% of the appointment panel is male. So letters recommending males were on average longer, more detailed, and focused more on their research ability and careers than those for women. and they contained a higher proportion of standout adjectives: superb, excellent, unique. But those written for women referred more often to interpersonal relationships, teaching, patience, care skills, and they contained fewer and less specific references to research. They contained more doubt-raising statements and personal information than were strictly necessary. And they contained more grindstone adjectives, you know, like conscientious, diligent, meticulous, thorough. I was told in my appointment to Oxford that my reference said that someone said to me, you know, they said you were very enthusiastic, and we know what that means, don't we? The person said to me that no one else really wanted you, so you should remember that. That was very dispiriting, all right? Lots of research show that student evaluations are biased against women and minority, and yet they are very often used in hiring, tenure, and promotions. That really worries me. So my fifth recommendation is that we need to have trained equality and diversity representation on appointments panel. This is important not just for race, but for all protected minority characteristics. We also need to recognize cultural taxation on racialized minorities. They often do a lot to serve institutions' need for equality and diversity representation on committees, or to demonstrate their knowledge and their commitment to a cultural group. And these activities bring accolades to the institution, but they often go unrecognized and unrewarded. This work on equality and diversity should be properly recognized rather than presumed. It should be appreciated rather than treated with suspicion. Institutions and individuals need to act, okay? Do ask for more information, do ask for more data, more interpretation, more papers, more reports, but you can go on forever doing that. Don't delay acting until the never, never, when people are fully satisfied. Remember that the perfect is the enemy of the good. Justice delayed is justice denied. You can only steer a moving car, so move. You can always do better when you know better, but do something. And finally, I want to say, what does it take for an academic to thrive? Well, you need to excel. You need two interrelated things. First, you have to be good. I mean, I think this applies not just to academics. First, you obviously have to be good. You have to be creative, persuasive. You need confidence, self-belief, a sense that your views matter. But secondly, and crucially, you need presence and acknowledgement by others in the relevant community. So you feel that you have something to say, but you also know that others will give you the time of day. An individual success is bound up with the cooperation, acceptance, and recognition of others. And the problem for racialized minorities is in the second factor. They have long edited themselves to be acceptable, to be heard and recognized, to be given some of the goodies from the table, to belong. Lewis Hamilton said that the entry to my sport, Formula One, was square, and I was like a hexagon. And I thought, I'm never going to fit through that bloody thing. So I had to morph my way in, and then I could get back into the shape I was before. Racialized minorities are often excluded from the social circle of belonging, of colleagues asking for your views, taking what you say seriously, asking you to join the football or the walk or the gym or the coffee or the dinner, of stopping to chat, giving you eye contact or a nod of acknowledgement, of recognizing your belonging and being on the same side. These are the rather intangible and subjective but consequential stuff that chips away at racialized minorities. The opposite of inclusion. This is the opposite of inclusion. It's discrimination by omission, right? It's not that you do something, but you just ignore us. Ali Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, said the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. There's no need for great malice to do great harm. The absence of empathy and understanding is enough. Michelle Wu, the new mayor of Boston and daughter of Taiwanese immigrants, said so many of us have known our whole lives what it feels like to be both invisible and also sticking out, but not seen for the person that you are, and judged and discriminated against simply because of appearance. Now, we all have unconscious bias. You have it, I have it. To deny it is an oxymoron. We all need to transcend our own subjectivity, to enter the world of others, and to care about justice and flourishing for everyone. And I think that if being educated means anything, it means that we should not recoil from learning about things that make us uncomfortable. And if legal education means anything, it should be not just to get good salaries and comfortable homes. It should be to move forward the goals of social and legal justice. Diversity is not a zero-sum game. Like the gene pool, I think diversity strengthens us. It strengthens us to meet the challenges in a globalized, interconnected world. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mindy.
How about I just start taking the Q&A? Is that okay? Okay, so the first question says, what are some specific ways to challenge the blah, blah, blah tendencies at institutional level? Even when an organization has a high level commitment to diversity, that doesn't always translate into practical measures and opportunities for making that commitment meaningful. How have you been able to change policies and attitudes at Oxford? Okay, so I did make the recommendations that I talked about today to the university, and I'm glad to see that some of them have been, well, quite a lot of them have been adopted. I'm sure other people also made those suggestions. For example, training of reception. For example, we've, in fact, later on today, I've got a meeting of the listening project. So we're having an anonymous listening project where people fill out a form and anonymously and about some incident and also how it made them feel. And then we're going to publicize it. And then I'm going to deliver a lecture to go along with it. I suppose it's to constantly remind people that what are they doing about it other than making these self-declarations. I think that's it. It's also to realize that you shouldn't presume that racialized minorities will be taking on all of these jobs to do with equality and diversity, and to properly recognize and reward these things. And to, for example, publicize how to be an ally, these sorts of things. We have a public sector equality duty, which is stated at the beginning of every single meeting, so that we ask ourselves at the start of every meeting, whether any decisions that we make are going to affect what is the impact on equality. So we talk about that. These are the sorts of ways you can make a start. What do you think about the argument that anti-racism measures have gone too far sometimes? For example, North Korean defector said she was being discouraged to read Jane Austen at Columbia because Austen was colonialist. Okay, well, I mean, the thing is, you can, I think it goes so much one way that I'm not too worried about going too far the other way, I have to say. I think if you put things into context, you can say, if I read Jane Austen, I just think, oh my God, the sexism in those days, what women spend all their time plotting how to marry a rich man, but if you put it into context, I think, why shouldn't you read them? I don't have any problems with that. But at the same time, it's about recognizing, putting it into context. And if you do, I don't see a problem with it. What can we do to fight and draw attention to some of the more personal effects of differential treatment? For example, confidence gap, hesitation to apply for grants, promotions, awards as often as other colleagues. Well, I think you do need a champion. So we have appointed an Associate Dean of Equality and Diversity, and we reward that person in the same way we reward the Associate Dean of taught graduates, in the same way we, they are given as much credit as the Associate Dean of undergraduates. And they do a lot, right? They do a lot to highlight things and to hold workshops. As Dean, I am assiduous, I hope, keeping an eye across the faculty and giving talks and prompting people to go for promotions, even when they think they're not ready. You know, I always say, look, it's about time you have a go. And as long as you can go, meh, if I don't get it, you're not going to die and, you know, feel really bad. You should just go for it, you know, because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So really, you need models, you need champions, you need people who are going to mentor you. I think these things are really important. You need workshops on how to apply for grants. You need people who are willing to show you their grants, you know, who are willing to promote, and also for you to get together. And I think just realizing it's an issue, I think is a big thing, because I remember thinking, well, I'm not having this, you know, as a woman. Why are women paid less, for example? It's well known that there's a pay gap and that it's going to take, you know, 140 years for us to close the pay gap. Now, women should be thinking, I'm not having this. What are we going to do about this? Let's have a support group. Let's ask the faculty to do a workshop on X, Y, and Z. Let's ask them to invite so-and-so to come and talk to us. You've got to take the initiative. You can't just wait for other people to do things. I see that there's stuff on chat. Shall we have a look? So I think that was the end of Q&A that I can see.
I'm not sure. Is Marco, is your microphone working again?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, can hear
yes,
now.
yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But
Oh,
yes,
no, there are more questions.
sorry,
There are more questions. Okay, Mindy, you have achieved what many would see as one of the apex. Certainly your continued success and visibility provides many benefits to students and junior, even senior scholars impacted by the issues. I'm curious about your thoughts, considering a potential difficulty. Those at Oxford and elsewhere who point to your success as an indication that these issues are either non-existent or trivial, has this potential dynamic been part of your existence since being appointed as dean? Yeah, I would say that. So I didn't apply to be dean. I was asked whether I was willing to put my name forward when I was on sabbatical in New Zealand. The appointments panel were, they told me that they were allowed to go and, you know, tap people on the shoulder. And I thought about it because the last thing I wanted to do was administration at this time of my career. I have books to write, I have articles to finish, I have workshops and so on. And so I had actually turned down being subordinate of my college. But when the faculty called, I thought, well, this would, if I took this on, it would make the issue more invisible. It would make it less of an issue. And, you know, I hope it doesn't sound, you know, too proud, but I took this on because I cared about race equality. And actually at my interview, someone said, well, how do you feel about, you know, equality and diversity? And I thought, try not to roll your eyes, Mindy. And I thought, well, I'm for it, you know, you know, it's important. And then I thought, you know, I'm just cynical me. And I said, look, you know, if you appoint someone who looks like me, you don't have to say very much about equality and diversity. You'll have said a lot by making the appointment. It is true, but I will say that whilst I've been dean, I have faced a good many issues on race. I have faced a good many alumnus and alumni and alumnae who were a bit shocked, and you can see them visibly shocked when you are announced as the dean, who don't even know how to open their mouths sometimes, you know. I mean, I was introduced as the dean to a Court of Appeal judge recently, as the dean of the Oxford Law Faculty, and he looked at me and said, do you do law? And I had to stifle the kind of urge to say, no, I was appointed as dean for my good looks, you know. But you know, I said, yes, I did do law. And then he said, oh, are you in a college? Because he was desperately trying to triangulate, because what he saw didn't tally with what he heard, that I was the dean. And he said, are you in college? And I said, yes, I'm at Merton. And he said, do you teach? And I said, not while I'm being dean. And he said, are you Dean of Students? And I said, and my colleague was getting a bit embarrassed and said, no, she's the Dean of the Oxford Law Faculty. And she's an expert on, you know, Asian law jurisdictions on contract law. And the judge said to me, any I might have heard of. And I said, China? And I mean, it just went on like this. It was incredible. He just didn't give up. He said, well, do you write? And I said, yes. And he said, what do you write on? I said, contract law. And he said, well, what on contract law? Surely not all of it. And I said, yes, all of it. You know, and then I thought, yeah, I've had enough of this, and walked off. But I get this really quite frequently. I had a colleague who, I mean, they have to have a meeting with me, you know, for promotion to full professor, and I had to ask a couple of questions about the CV, and the person looked at me and said, I don't know, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You know, Mindy, I ask the questions around here. And I said, okay, what would you like to know about me? I mean, there were quite a few times where I would say that it was an issue, but I also know that for students, you know, a lot of our graduate students are preponderantly international. And I know that many of them have expressed to me how much it means to them to have a, you know, racialized minority dean, and that it gives them a platform and they appreciate it. So yeah, I would say it has been an issue, definitely. Yes, I can give you many stories. I remember someone who was a big hotshot lawyer in the city, who was on one of our committees as an external, and he was chairing it. And he said to me when he was stepping down, I think he started the sentence without knowing how he was going to finish it. He said, well, you're doing a good job, Mindy. You know, when you started, I was a bit worried. And then I thought, why would you be a bit worried? You don't know me at all. You know, I'd never met this man. Why would you be worried? So I just let him off because I thought, okay. So Ethel Chan, many years ago, I was questioned about my scientific writing skills by my own supervisor when I submitted my thesis during my master's in KCL, even though I graduated from UCL. It's very disappointed to be questioned about your skills. What are the ways to have presence in academia as a minority? Is it necessary to constantly tell someone that I'm capable? No, I think you don't. I mean, the thing is, I know some people who do as a way of preempting, right? As a way of saying, don't treat me like, but I don't do it anymore. And it's sometimes quite funny, you know, sometimes it's quite funny, but sometimes it's really annoying. No, I know. I think you just call it out. Sometimes you might have to say, well, I graduated from UCL. I mean, you know, I think you need to say something, but it's just factual. It doesn't need to be confrontational. It just needs to be factual. I mean, you know, an emeritus professor at Oxford yelled at me because I wouldn't do what he wanted to do as dean. He thought I should just comply with his request. And when I didn't, he started yelling at me at great volume. And I think then he became embarrassed about the fact that he was yelling at the dean. And I did say to him, you have been yelling at me. And then he wrote something to me, I wrote something back, and he pointed out my one spelling error. And I said, yeah, English is my second language. And he said, well, you speak it very well. Well, I just shrugged that off. I just think, for crying out loud, really. But I think probably as a more senior person, it's easier for me to shrug off. I acknowledge that. But I think if someone is willing to call you out, then you ought to say, my scientific writing skills are as good as anyone who graduated from UCL. I think factual, not feelings, factual information is important. What is your view on Nigerian bans on foreign models? They want to protect the local industry because the field is always dominated by foreign models. Well, you can see why. You can see why. I was surprised when I first came to Hong Kong and saw that all the big billboards, the models and the big billboards are all, well, almost all white, you know, and all the whitening creams and so on. Ideals of beauty are very, very much white. And I realized that when I was pregnant with my first child, and I thought, oh, I woke up and I thought I dreamt about my first child, and the baby is blonde with blue eyes. And I thought, how much have I been how much have I been acclimatized to local ideas of what beauty looks like? So I can see why they want to do that. I can see all of these sort of measures to try and balance things out. Racial profiling by law enforcement authorities is problematic as it reinforces racial stereotyping. Yet, given that law enforcement resources are limited, authorities are also expected to target resources at statistically high-risk groups. Do you have any views on how a fair balance can be struck? Well, I think you're also saying to people, I mean, I tweeted recently about Tesco's, which is our main supermarket, one of our main supermarkets in the UK, where they put security tags on makeup for Black people. But the same brand, the same makeup, but no security tags on the white makeup. And I thought about this a good deal because, of course, some people will say, oh, they know what's been stolen. And I thought, but you're also making a social statement, right? What is the statement you're making? This is what the public sector equality duty requires you to think about. What are the public statements you are making to the world when you do something like this? And what is your impact on racialized minorities when they see this? So I think there are certain things where, you need to have reasonable belief. And I think that Black people, that being a Black person or being whatever minority group you're targeting is not a reasonable belief, because they are protected. They ought to be protected characteristics. I think that's all. And I think we're getting to one more. I also wonder how you experience the intersection of these issues with extant debates regarding issues of class. In many countries, there is a large back and forth on whether examining any of these issues in isolation limits truly changing patterns of elite reproduction. Yeah, I mean, at Oxford, it's obviously one of the things I always have to deal with is the fact of undergraduates coming in from very working class backgrounds who then experience huge non-belonging issues, all right? I have the same, I get invited to big posh operas and I have no background whatsoever in them, right? And I can feel the person inviting me thinking, oh, it's wasted on her or something like that. And I'm always having to provide reassurance to my undergraduates, who can't afford the suits to do things, who can't afford the recreation, who are different. And I've had to take them aside and say, this person who's been getting at you, do you care about their opinion? Do you respect their opinion? And they say no. And I said, well, why are you giving them so much power over you? Why are you thinking of dropping out? This is utterly ridiculous. But yeah, I think class is one of the most difficult things to deal with. And certainly as an Asian woman, sometimes I don't know whether someone is reacting to the fact that I'm female, or to the fact that I am a mother, or to the fact that I'm Chinese, or to all of these. I know that my eldest son, my older two sons have dyslexia. And, when I tried to make a fuss about the fact that my eldest son, couldn't tell the time, had struggles with times tables, the special needs person said to me, well, you people worry more about these sorts of things. And I thought, what do you mean you people? What kind of you people are you talking about? Is it because I'm Chinese? Is it because I'm middle class? Is it because, what is it? So yeah, I think these things are really, really difficult, but intersectionality definitely right up there. We need to do a lot more work about all of these things. And yeah, okay, so I'm worried about time up.
Yes, you're right. I think in saying that we're coming to the end of the session. I'm sorry about the audio early on. I don't quite know what happened. But what I was trying to say earlier was I want to say thank you to you, Mindy, for sharing with us not only your thoughts on policy, but also some of the more personal experiences. And we'll be continuing the conversation for the rest of this, at least the rest of the semester here at HKU. Thank you. I'd like to also say thank you to the audience for joining us this afternoon. And CCPL will be posting this talk on its website in due course. So if you'd like to review any of the content from today, that will be up in probably later this week. So thank you again to Mindy. Thank you again to you all. Have a good evening, afternoon.
Bye.